Well, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to CPAC for putting on this great panel. And so I just kind of wanted to go around and introduce everybody here. We've got David Leavitt from Utah County District Attorney. We have Brett Tolman, former U.S. Attorney and ACU Senior Fellow. We've got Kent Volkmer from Pinal County, Arizona. He's on that side. I got to keep remembering where I'm at. And then, of course, we have the fabulous Tori Verber Salazar from San Joaquin County, and she's their district attorney out in California. So really our conversation that we kind of wanted to talk about was conservative prosecutors, talking about criminal justice reform, obviously, but kind of really highlighting all of the great work that these fine prosecutors have done in their districts, and what they've learned about, and some of the lessons that we can kind of take from that, and really just that this has been a conservative issue. We've been leading on this for quite some time, and so I kind of wanted to just kick it off. We'll start with David. I think talking about your passion issue, and tell them all about that.
My passion issue. I'd love to talk to you about my passion issue. People often say that criminal justice reform is not a conservative issue. And I like to point out that because we're conservatives, we distrust government generally, right? And it seems to be that there always is a bit of a disconnect between our distrust of government, but this perception that we should always trust government, meaning prosecutors and the police, when it comes to law enforcement issues. But the reality is we're still just government, right? Now, our founders gave us a government. They gave us a legislative branch to make laws, an executive branch to enforce those laws. We're part of that executive branch, and a judiciary to keep those laws to keep those two branches of government in harmony with each other. But there's two significant powers that the people never gave government. Number one is the power to accuse someone of a crime. And number two is the power to find a fellow citizen guilty of a crime. They retained those powers to themselves through the grand jury and through the regular jury. And that worked well for a time until the Civil War. In the Civil War, we introduced what many in the system in the Civil War times thought was a bit of a corruption. It was something called the plea bargain. And we all know what a plea bargain is, but that process started in the Civil War. And really what happens in a plea bargain is, instead of basing a case or a conviction on a fact, we base a conviction on a negotiation between the lawyers. Plea bargains started in the Civil War. They continued until, by the time we got to 1970, we were plea bargaining 75% of all of our cases. It wasn't until 1970 or 1969 or 70 that the Supreme Court finally ruled that plea bargains were legal, and at that point, it exploded. Today, we plea bargain over 99% of our cases. What that really means is that every time we plea bargain a case, the government doesn't have to prove the allegations the government makes. And if the government doesn't have to prove the allegations it makes in a criminal case, what makes us believe that at some point the government won't do that to us? And so my passion is to restore our principles of criminal justice, to return to the jury trial, to realize that as the elected county attorney in my jurisdiction, I have the power to accuse anyone I want to accuse, charge anyone I want to charge, give a plea bargain or not to anyone I want to, and I have 100% complete, unfettered power, nearly, for my ability to act. That's simply too much power in one person. And so my passion is to return power to people. And once we begin to do that and reduce the number of our plea bargains, then we will see everything else fall into line as far as what's wrong with the criminal justice system. Hopefully that wasn't too long of an answer.
No, I think that answered it just perfect. Kick it over to my right. Let's see what's going on here with Brett Tolman. Tell us all about
my passion.
Your passion.
Well, first of all, you're all here because you're much smarter than everyone else in this conference, because this is one of the most important issues. So I got to applaud all of you for being here. I mean, think about it. There's even folks like 20-year-olds from Miami, Ohio, and stuff like that we met at the pool. So I'm proud of them for showing up. But look, this is an issue that I am passionate about. I will tell you, I was a prosecutor for over a decade. I was a federal prosecutor. I agree with David. I had power. And that power caused me to believe also that I was a better lawyer than I was. I mean, plain and simple. I also thought that my analysis of things was even more important than other people's analysis of things, because that power that you're wielding, you don't realize its effect on you. As a prosecutor, I argued a case. I thought I was brilliant. Turns out I just represented the government, and the government always wins, right? If you've ever practiced defense law, you know. And so my first year as a defense lawyer, I walked in and I expected to win my argument. And when I lost, I sat there and I was like, well, what happened? I'm the same. I'm brilliant. I should have won this thing. Turns out I wasn't. I lost, and I got sort of just kicked out of the courtroom on that experience. But my passion now is to try to change the culture. And you heard it in David. I mean, that is rare, what you just heard. Very rare for someone to say, hey, I have a ton of power. It's way more than I should have. Let's return some of it. I mean, that hasn't happened since George Washington stood in Annapolis and gave back all the power to the military, right, when he controlled it. It's that significant, though, and it's going to take that much courage to do it. So my passion now is to talk to folks, work with prosecutors, develop a different culture in a prosecutor's office, in a prosecutor's mind and heart, and in the criminal justice system as a whole. If we believe that government is really bad, big government is bad, and that it's bad at doing things really well and doing it efficiently, well, guess what? That's what's happening in the criminal justice system as well. Big government does not translate into really good policy. So there are incredible programs that are starting to develop, and minds are starting to be changed. I was tough on crime. I put people in prison for a long time. In the federal system, as a federal prosecutor, my ability to put someone in prison for the rest of their life was very easy to do. I used to give speeches to companies and say, there are 5,000 federal criminal statutes, but there are over 300,000 regulations with criminal penalties. How hard do you think it would be for me to find something about you I could prosecute you for? Not hard. It's very easy. I could do it. Give me one executive, give me any company, and I can find something that if I believed I could present to the grand jury, I'm going to get an indictment from the grand jury, and you're off and running. And that is the power of the criminal justice system right now. So my hope is to work in great programs like this with American Conservative Union that works so hard to try to bring this issue to conservatives and let them know, guess what? You will not fix the criminal justice system except if the conservatives finally start to work on it. That will be that moment when you start to fix the criminal justice system. There's a program, a pilot program being run, and Right on Crime is working on this, and it is in connection with Chan Zuckerberg and Stanford University. And for example, guess what this program does? It is a curriculum, a 6 to 8 week curriculum for prosecutors. And they come and they learn from the Stanford Business School about leadership, about data, about using data to try to effectively formulate their policies. And they get to hear from many of us that have seen more than just that moment when we have power and we're prosecuting. And I believe if we will start to change the criminal justice system, and that's why you saw the impact, for example, of President Trump when he was in office. Why did he do that? Because he saw that conservatives could change the criminal justice system without giving up safety, without giving up the fairness in the administration of justice, and I'm about that. I give him tremendous credit for having the courage to really be the first president. I tried to get President Obama and President Bush to engage at a high level and do this, and it really wasn't until President Trump did it. And so, great credit to him, great credit to the conservatives who are willing to step up, and I'm honored to be on this stage with Chelsea and this whole crew of people that have seen that and are effectively trying to make those changes.
Thank you, Brad. Moving on to sharing our passions again, but I really, we've got a special lady over here, Tori, a conservative from California. I know that's hard to come by, but...
Wait, say that again. Where is that from?
Say what? Tori, tell us about, I know a lot of things are very close to your heart, restorative justice being one of them. Tell us about your passion.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being with the opportunity to be here with such a wonderful panel, and thank all of you. Criminal justice and restorative justice, is a Republican issue. I think it is one of the top 5 issues, but so often we don't get the credit for it. When in reality, we're leading the way on this because we believe, as people of faith, in second chances. We believe in redemption, and we believe that people deserve an opportunity to go forth and be who they are and be that well. And so we are working hard to create those pathways. So just give you kind of an example. In California, if you are arrested tonight, say for murder, and you're booked, tomorrow we find out you weren't the suspect and you're released. But on your criminal history, which is commonly referred to as a rap sheet, on your rap sheet for 99 years it shows you were arrested for murder. Or imagine if it was child molestation or something along these lines. And I don't know why, but somehow government picked 99 years. Now, you can't have anything really on your history until you're 18, so it would not be removed until you're 117 years old. Now, California, we are healthy living, but I don't think we're living that long. So we really have to ask ourselves, what are we doing to people, and why are we doing this to them, and what is the economic impact, what is the emotional impact, what is the generational harm that we're doing? So one of the big things that we're doing in California, starting just this past January 1st, is we're sealing criminal history records. They can still be used by law enforcement, so I can use them as a prior offense if that's necessary. But from a public spectrum, it allows people who have made a mistake in their life, who have paid their debt to society, accepted responsibility, completed all the terms and conditions to go forth and live their life in a capability and possibility of doing quite well. And that'll allow them to get a job that pays above the table. So they'll now be making a livable, taxable wage. And that'll give them an opportunity to grow. If we don't do this, if we continue to punish people for the remainder of maybe they did 6 months in the county jail, but the sentence is actually 99 years long because it's on their criminal history. So we have to get to that point where we seal those records, not from prosecution or law enforcement purposes, but from the public purpose, because that person who's done well in life and has accepted responsibility and has redeemed themselves should have our support going forward. They shouldn't be in the same category as another person who continues to commit crime and continues to commit crime. So we're really working in California on to clear your record, how to clear that up. And if you were wrongfully accused, to take that off your criminal history so that it doesn't stay there for 99 years and people wonder, why were you arrested for murder 2 years ago? When in reality, we had the wrong suspect. And so we're really working on how to clean up that history to give people a pathway forward. As I always say, come for the salvation, stay for the savings, or come for the savings and stay for the salvation. Because if we do not do this, people will not make a livable wage. They will probably not pay into FICA like the rest of us get the pleasure of doing. And, but they will need all the services. They're going to need every government assistance that they can to be sustainable, but not pay into it. So economically, for us, for our children and our grandchildren, that is not sustainable government. And so we have to start looking at these things. One, honoring and recognizing the individuals that are doing right and acknowledging, accepting responsibility, and also from an economic standpoint. And that goes back to what we heard about earlier, is looking at data and research and showing, was our intent? Why did we decide on 99 years? Somebody picked that, and it makes no logical sense. So let's get rid of it, and let's do better. And so that's really what we're focusing in California, is our data and research to just drive better decision making, and really looking at the role that as a prosecutor I play in affecting the economy, the healing, and the spiritual and the soul of my community. Because the first and foremost thing I do as a prosecutor is protect and honor and cherish my victims and work every day to heal them. But one tool I can do to help heal them is make sure that the person who committed the crime doesn't do it again. And we do that by finding positive pathways forward. So thank you.
No, I think, and this is a perfect segue because I already know my other favorite gentleman down here's passion, and I think that talking about a pathway forward and diversion, I hate to give a little sneak peek, but Kurt has a very special passion.
So my passion, I have to give a little context to it. It's really community safety. I'm going to give you a real quick primer. I'm kind of a data geek, so that it was true to my heart when he talked about doing research and using data to make decisions. Nationally, 5 out of 6 people that go to prison are rearrested within 9 years for committing another criminal offense. Think of that, 5 out of 6, 83% of people are rearrested. Prison doesn't work the way that we think it does. That's the bottom line. In Arizona, where I'm from, over 80% of our inmates in prison suffer from a significant history of substance abuse. That's by DOC's own examination. 75% of all people have a significant history or a significant incidence of mental breakdown or significant mental health history. Again, I want you to think about that. 80 to 85% have a significant drug issue. 75% have mental health issues. That's who we're putting in prison. Once we put them in prison, we do absolutely nothing to then rehabilitate them. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Bleckman. I believe Robert Bleckman is his name, but Dr. Bleckman did a presentation I was at, and he said something that stuck with me. He said, if you really want to rehabilitate somebody, you have to do 2 things. You have to change their values, and you have to add or give them a skill. And if you don't do both, if you don't change their values and you don't add their skills, you have not rehabilitated them. And then he said, ask yourself, does your Department of Corrections truly rehabilitate somebody? And the answer is no. For a long time, us as conservatives believe that the answer is to lock people up. If we can just put them away and lock them up, they'll be better. We'll scare them into compliance. The reality is we know that that doesn't work. Recidivism rates 83%. So what we looked at is what could we do to get people off of that ramp, to off-ramp them? And that's really where diversion comes in. I'm going to put this in context for everybody. I'm looking at the audience out here, and much to what Brett said, I'm pretty confident most of you have probably committed a felony at some point in your life. He's laughing, but he knows if you've ever smoked marijuana, if you've ever used any recreational drug, if you've ever at 10 o'clock at night had the worst toothache you've ever had and you took your spouse's medication, you committed a felony. In Arizona, if you called your friend up because you said, look, I don't want to pay the $500 deductible to go to the ER. Do you have anything so I can go see my doctor in the morning? You've committed 2 different felonies. And heaven forbid, if you offered to give them money for driving it over to you, you've committed a felony that would require you to go to prison.
My sons are nervous right now in the back. They're sweating back there.
Put it this way, think the dumbest decision you've ever made, the poorest decision, and imagine there was a police officer that was standing right there beside you. I bring that up not to shame anybody, to tell you we've all made dumb decisions. And I promise you, saddling you with a felony, giving you the scarlet letter for the rest of your life does not make any sense. Sending you to prison is not going to fix that bad decision. We're all fallen human beings. We all make dumb decisions. And that's where diversion comes in. It's a long-winded way to get here. But diversion are for those people that need what I like to say is a kick in the pants as opposed to a criminal conviction. We look at them. It's for the people that aren't a danger to our community but made a bad decision, whether it's because they're under the influence, whether it's because they're at a difficult point in their life, whether it's because they just made a dumb decision because they were angry. They don't need a criminal conviction. Instead, we need to make sure that they make amends to society. So what we do is we do an assessment. We actually do a risk assessment, and then we put them in an individual program based on the outcome of that assessment. If they have a substance abuse issue, we make them do substance abuse counseling. If they have an anger management issue, we make them do anger management counseling. We make them make restitution to the victim, if appropriate, and then they do some community service. And if you do all of that, we dismiss the charge in its entirety, so you move forward without that criminal conviction.
Is the charge brought?
Brett's got to, dampen my parade. So currently, we only have post-indictment diversion. And post-indictment diversion means they must be first criminally charged. Part of the reason we started that way is because we wanted to ensure that this wasn't used as a tool by prosecutors to essentially cajole those that maybe didn't commit the crime or marginally, and to David's point, there's very weak evidence. However, I will tell you that there is a bill that's going through the Arizona State Legislature that's actually going to fund a pre-indictment diversion program. And I've been active in supporting that, and I do believe we're hoping probably in July we'll be able to do both pre- and post-indictment.
What's great about that is that that's a victim prevention tool. Because when you do the diversion program, and looking at the diversion program we have in California, and in particular in San Joaquin County, our numbers are significantly better than those who do not do the diversion program. And those who don't are back within the criminal justice system within a 12 to 36 month period of time, which means they've caused a harm. And people don't really always remember this, is that when a person commits a crime, most likely the first person they hurt was their own family. So you have them as a victim as well, and to a degree, but you also have this victim that they caused. More often than not, the victim is a friend, family member, or closely associated, or lives in their neighborhood and damages their community. So the harm and the trauma grows exponentially with that one person's acts. If you can prevent that from happening, that is one of the best victim prevention tools. And people forget that because they think criminal justice is light on crime or criminal reform. Absolutely not. It is pro-victim. It is victim prevention, and it is a tool that data and research shows works.
I want to lend my voice to diversion programs as well. There are more victims than just the traditional victim. A defendant who's committing a crime, his or her children, his or her spouse, they're also victims. A victim by definition is someone who hasn't done something to deserve what has come upon them. Diversion programs assist victims in that way. In my county, we have a pre-filing diversion. I'm grateful that Arizona is going to have one. Pre-filing diversion programs are fabulous because typically the carrot has always been, well, if you obey probation, we won't put you in jail. Well, jail's not that big of a deterrent for most people, but becoming a criminal is. And so we say, we utilize the statute of limitations to say, we have 4 years to charge you. If you'll do X, Y, and Z and do so satisfactorily, we won't charge you with the crime. We'll give you a declination letter. And that absolutely protects us all. I'm sorry to take your...
No, not at all. I give Kent a little bit of a razzing there because when I was a prosecutor, I started also a diversion program, and it's after we had charged and they're already in and they're doing something, and then they prove themselves. And yet, it's very valuable. But the other day, I had an experience with a prosecutor. I'll give you this example. It's a pending case, so I'll try to keep some details out of this. But I actually talked him into a pre-charging diversion, knock on wood. He doesn't know that's what he's doing, but I think I've got him convinced that that's what we're doing. So I have a client come in, and he's accused of embezzling, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the client says, I didn't do it. But if I did do it, I'm paying it all back, and I'll pay it all back. And so then I'm like, okay, so I get my crack team on the case, and I get Katie and Madeline, and we're like, and this is Katie, this is Madeline, they work at my law firm, and I'm like, we have to help the government see this case differently than they believe this government right now. The prosecutor I know, he's a hard ass. He's awful to deal with on most of the cases I've ever dealt with him. In fact, he's the only prosecutor, and he's in my former office. He's the only prosecutor I've argued with, like gotten to an argument, a confrontational argument with. So I'm like, we have got to do something different. So we went through and we started to just examine and analyze all of the financial data to show and prove to the government. And then we had him sell his own assets and use that money to start paying back and get it 100% paid back, and just kept talking the government into just give me some more time and then we'll meet. Give me some more time and then we'll meet, right? And he kept saying, we're going to charge him on this, and yeah, we'll meet. And then COVID helped us out, and we had time. We started digging into it. But we took a PowerPoint presentation, and we went through and we showed every bit of the money that went back that he paid. And we showed it using the way they do when they source money laundering or they source their financial crimes. And we just showed them slide by slide going through it. We get done, and they're still convinced he's a bad guy, so they have follow-up questions, and we answer those, and then it goes on for a while. Then pretty soon he says, you know what, this was really impressive, and I've never had anyone that's, ever done this. And, I was convinced they're just going to charge him. He goes, I think maybe we should do something different. I'm like, oh yeah, what do you think you should do in this case? To the guy that, might have taken some money and paid it all back in a short period of time, what do you think we should do? And I was so ready for him to say that he's going to charge him with a felony, right? So he learns his lesson, but then he's not going to go. And he doesn't. And he says, hey, what if I just charge the company, and the company gets the felony, and he can represent the company, and then we'll put him on conditions, and then he has to submit, this same company will have to submit to some audits, and then he won't get a felony. I nearly fell over in my chair, and I tell our staff that, and they're like, what? But it dawned on me that was the first time that he had ever seen like that effort prior to the decision to go in and get the felony. So if I could do that in every case, I would do that. But if you had a prosecutor that adopted these and were following the lead like these prosecutors are right now, think of the type of justice you would start to have in this country.
Really, if you think about it, it's about redemption, not retribution. And if you think about the concept of redemption, I want you to think of two examples. A stock certificate. A stock certificate is a piece of paper that evidences the ability to redeem that stock certificate for something of greater value, right? And that's what we have to do with our brothers and sisters who are defendants, is help redeem them into something greater. But there's another concept of redemption. In 2018, I think it was, the University of Virginia was the #1 seed in the NCAA March Madness. And they became the first team in NCAA history to lose to a 16 seed. They were humiliated. 2019, again, they were the #1 seed, and they won the national championship in basketball. And everyone said they redeemed themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, as a society, we must redeem ourselves for how poorly we have dealt with this issue. There is nothing more socialistic in society than the criminal justice system. We pay our money to the government, and we expect the government to take care of the problem. The government will not take care of this problem. Just like any other government program, when the government gets a hold of it, it will make it worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. Redemptive justice demands that everyday garden variety people get involved with the criminal justice system to help their fellow citizens come out of their problems. 90% of the people in our criminal justice system are not violent people. They're just like you and me. And that affords us a tremendous opportunity to get involved and to help our fellow citizens. And I'll give you a plug. In the coming weeks and months, go to redemptivejustice.org or davidlevitt.com. They point to the same place, because that's the kind of justice I promote, and we all promote. But I put a name to it: redemptive justice, not restorative, because restorative justice puts us in the same position that they were in when they started. We've got to do better than that. And so to me, it's about all of us coming together and realizing that we can all do better. Not only me as the prosecutor, but all of us as citizens. We have to involve ourselves in this problem. The woman down the street who's addicted to Valium because she's strung out because of her 4 kids, that's our problem. That's not simply the government's problem.
So I feel compelled to throw this out there because you hear all of this, and it may concern you, because I've had this conversation with people. Look, I love what you're saying, but at the end of the day, I need to make sure that I'm safe. And what you're saying is all well and good, but it seems like you're focusing on the individual defendant, not on our community as a whole. Let me let you in on a secret. The stuff we're talking about actually makes us safer as a community. I'm going to use my community as an example. My predecessor believed that you would just throw everybody in prison. If they could go to prison, he put them in prison, because if they were in prison, they could not harm you. That was his philosophy, and our community was okay with it. But eventually it became so costly that here little old me came along and said, hey, I think there's a better way. And I want to tell you, in the last, now this is my 5th year in the office, what we've done. We have reduced felony charging by 30%. We've reduced the number of people we put in prison annually by 35%. We've put 40% more people on probation. And we have year over year over year dropped our actual index rate, which is the criminal rate, the dangerous crimes against people, by 17 to 18% year over year over year over year. We are currently at less than 50% of the national rate for index crimes. And when I'm talking index crimes, rape, robbery, murder, home invasion, auto theft, human smuggling, we're not talking about simple non-victim drug cases. We're talking about those cases that most impact us in the very fabric of our society. Using these principles, we can actually make our community safer. And as conservatives, you're telling me we can do something cheaper and make us safer? It's a no-brainer, and we as conservatives need to get behind all of these ideas.
That is awesome.
Amen.
That is awesome.
Any last closing thoughts?
So I just one quick comment, because that is awesome. I got to tell you, can you send me that data? Because I would like that data. But
Tattooed on his back.
yeah, well, tattoo. Do you have that tattooed on your? So I will tell you that is what I have been preaching till I was blue in the face for over a decade now. That we will be safer if we will apply some of these and start to do them. And you get there's this certain cross-section that is like, no, you have to just punish. That's the only way that you're going to accomplish anything. And that punishment is going to keep us safer. But the last case I did as a prosecutor, I prosecuted the kidnapper of Elizabeth Smart. I'm very proud of that work, and I put him away for the rest of his life. And look, if he were to get out, I know what would happen. So we know there are always those instances where it's the 10% that is that there's violent or there's problems or there's issues, and that you have to have a program that protects us from those. But I also put away Marco Antonio Rivas, who's serving 35 years, and he was 23 years old, and I had to get special permission to offer him 35 years in federal prison, and he didn't kill anyone, he didn't rape anyone, and he's not violent. But people don't really understand the power that a prosecutor has. The particular statutes that he violated stacked in a way that caused him to actually be facing at a minimum 75 years in federal prison, and I had to get permission to get him 35. He was just a little bit older than you guys, right? And older than my youngest son, and he's in there for 35 years, not violent. So we've seen both of these, and we've started to understand there is a cross-section that you can do something different with. You can do it in a way that's driven by data and research, bring them out of the system, while at the same time protecting against those that, like the Brian David Mitchell who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart.
I think what's important too is that the vast majority for us in San Joaquin County are about 85+% are men. And so now we're putting men back in homes, and we're giving them the opportunity to break that generational harm and that generational poverty, because crime does not pay. There is a huge economic impact to it. And it's an economic impact to the spouse that is left in the home, to the children, to the parents and grandparents, the stigma that's associated with it. So the destabilization of the family is significant. And then what we'll see is a higher rate of truancy and expulsion and suspension. And those are all areas where government, again, will become involved. So when you look at those primary costs, for us in California, it's $65,000 to $95,000 a year to house an inmate. And then you look at those secondary costs, it costs me about $30,000 to $40,000, myself and the public defender, to prosecute. If it's a complex litigation, could go up to $500,000, $1 million, depending on how many experts we have to bring in. And then if you look at that, and then you say, okay, that's a lot of money, and then you look at that secondary tier of what happened to the destabilization of that family and the residual family members, and then to that neighborhood and to that community, and you can see how quick and how devastating this can be to a community. And so I think it's very important that when you're thinking about criminal justice, we've all grown up, or at least I grew up, and I ran in 2014 Tough on Crime. I was a homicide prosecutor. I've seen the worst of the worst. And I thought I was doing what was right and what was just and what was fair. But looking back, I realized I didn't solve any problems. Yes, I have no problem holding people accountable for harm that they commit. But what was the end result? What did I really make better? And as a prosecutor, how did I keep my community safe? How did I make it better? And that's when you start looking at the data and research and you start to realize, I've got to have the courage to say, that's not the right pathway. That's not what's best, and that is not what justice in America is. And I'm actually not creating a place where my community is safer. Everything I do, and the waking hours, and I guarantee you, all of these people are up at 3:30 in the morning thinking, how can I keep my community safe? How can I keep victims safe? How can I help them heal? If we don't look at this data and research, and we don't have the courage to change from the way that we've done business in the past, then shame on us. Because we have to be brave, even against all adversaries who are against this or anti-reform or anti-redemption, which is a beautiful word, and I'm going to steal it. But you know, we have to be able to, in strength and courage, to do this, because it does matter, because it affects all of us one way or another. Every crime that occurs, economically, spiritually, and emotionally, affects your community. And so if we could fix that, why wouldn't we use every tool? And I want to give a shout out to David. He just got a bill passed that I think is incredible, because it kind of goes back to what I'm saying. In California, there's 4,900 consequences for a felony conviction, the three big being education, economic, and housing. You're out. It's out. You know, how do you live without education, housing, and employment? That is very difficult, and that's why California has a significant homeless problem, because we have so many people engaged in the criminal justice system that can't afford to get out of it, and it drives them further into homelessness. But one of the things that happens to all of us in this day and age of social media and technology is that when you are arrested for a crime, as we've all seen, there's a booking photo. Never a good photo. I've never seen anybody take a good booking photo, I don't think, in the history. And then there's an allegation made by law enforcement of the pending charges. So Dave, I'm going to have you jump in, because I think this is amazing, the work you're doing. Absolutely amazing.
Thank you. The reality is we're presumed innocent, right? But a jail booking photo 100 years ago was a photo that went into a file and was forgotten. That would be the case 30 years ago. But today, that booking photo, within 10 minutes or 20 minutes, is on social media, picked up automatically by some computer program and spread all over the world. You will never get it off. And it's absolutely the most consequential punishment most offenders will ever receive in their life, whether they're guilty or whether they're not. But what's worse is that when we all see a mugshot, the first thing in almost everyone's mind is, hey, there's a criminal, right? Now, it would be different if we looked at that mugshot and said, well, wow, that person's presumed innocent. I wonder what's going to happen with that case. But that never happens. And so I put a bill together, submitted it to my legislator that said this: to preserve the presumption of innocence and people's lives moving forward, the release of a booking mugshot has to be prohibited until after conviction. And
David, tell them who opposed that bill.
I will tell you who opposed that bill. Yeah. Let me say this. Utah is arguably among the most conservative states in the nation, right?
Bill
Sure it's
Clinton
not
came
California?
in third.
It may be California, right?
Well, to his point, Bill Clinton came in third in Utah.
That's right.
And in one county, he came in fourth.
That's right.
To Bo Gritz.
That's right. Now, so we're a very conservative state, right? That bill last week and this week, just a few days ago, passed the Utah House 68-1, and it passed the Utah State Senate unanimously. And so, and to Brett's point, it was opposed by one special interest group, the news media. The news media.
The media.
And they brought in their national watchdogs, and they brought in their lawyers and their lobbyists, and they put all the pressure they could upon the state legislature. And if you don't think that criminal justice reform is a conservative issue, look at this issue in the state of Utah when out of 100 and something legislators, only one of them voted against it. And that's the point. Because the point is this. We have a skewed notion of what justice is in America. What's justice? Well, as the elected prosecutor, I can't unkill somebody. I can't unrape anyone. I can't financially undevastate someone. I can't provide the justice which would be put them in the position they were in before they were there. And on the other side of the coin, I can't take the defendant and give that defendant a stable home. I can't magically find a school teacher who will take that defendant under his wing and make sure that that person never makes it to the criminal justice system. So I can't provide justice that way either. And criminal justice reform has got to start with the realization that justice is above our pay grade. Community protection is what it's about. And what you're seeing with these prosecutors on here is the template that will protect our community. And I applaud everyone on this stage for having the courage to do it. Tori, she and I met just a few hours ago, and immediately I understood, I felt this bit of kindredness, because I understood here's a prosecutor who, number one, is by and large hated by law enforcement because we are, quote, soft on crime. Well, we're not soft on crime. We're smart on crime. We understand that the violent and the dangerous need to go to prison, both for their benefit and for ours. However, there's another question. And so I applaud you for being here and for these prosecutors for being for taking a courageous stand.
I just love the fact that's, yeah. It was just so, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was so offensive to see the mainstream media just kind of pounce all of a sudden on this bill. And why? Because they just want to be able to put that photo up there, and they get their pages viewed more often, and they have this, and so it's not out of principle. It's based on something different, and that's when you start to see. Look, my theory is liberals are the worst at criminal justice reform being implemented. They are the worst in these big cities. Why? Because they don't always just stay on the data and the research and discover what works and what doesn't work. Instead, it's often born out of emotion. Now, it can be a righteous emotion that you have, but if you don't have a basis to do it with some data, with some research, with some expertise, then what you start to see is, like New York did bail reform, right? But instead of doing a thoughtful approach to it, they just said, no more bail, it's done, it's over, and everybody got out. They didn't do it with any sort of thought. And that's why I am imploring you as the leaders of this future, when I'm retire on a ranch with my horses and grandbabies, I'm telling you, you're the ones. You gotta be the ones that do this.
Well, thank you all so much for coming, and I think that it's really just important, one, to have this kind of conversation, to thank you guys for all of the work that you do, because I would be really, really scared for America if we didn't have such great prosecutors like yourselves. So you guys are showing that it is a justice system quite differently than my normal thought process, which it's a legal system, not a justice system. And I think that these guys really have put passion into their work, and we're really fortunate for that. So thank you.